Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new video that myself and a good friend of mine, PandaBeastMode, are putting out today. We're going to be talking about AROs and the second turn. The reason for this is because there's been a bit of talk on forums such as Reddit and Facebook about how alpha strikes in the first turn are really, really strong. This is certainly a phenomenon that I think I have seen various times, but there are also some definite advantages to AROs and to playing second. So today we want to talk about surviving the first turn, some good ARO pieces, and just focus on that side of things. Panda, how are you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. And I think this is a really common topic that different metas across the world struggle with, especially newer players often struggle to play against more experienced players when they're going second. And in some cases, they may end up even taking the first turn when it's not advantageous for them, just because they are afraid of that alpha strike. So hopefully we can give you some tips, some things you can think about when going second.
Yeah, I
And how
agree
to,
with that.
defend better.
My personal sense is that it's a little bit easier to play first than second, I think, but I'm sure some people would disagree with that. Nevertheless, I think we can get going. So the goals of today are just to talk about that sort of reactive turn and some different strategies for it. We're going to start by talking about our general goals in the reactive turn. Then we're going to look at some deployments. We're going to think about how we would deploy our own models to ARO against those deployments. And then we're just going to talk about a couple of different ARO pieces, really. So pretty simple for today. I think we're going to start by looking at a Yujing deployment here.
Maybe we can start by the overall goals for reactive turn.
Okay.
And just for context, in this imaginary game, we are playing Supremacy on this map that you can see.
Yes.
And I have deployed Yujing forces as an example, going first, and HeadChime is going to deploy his Hakislam forces.
Yeah. So I haven't deployed yet, but we've got a Yujing force here, and the mission is Supremacy. So for those of you who don't know, Supremacy is a pretty simple mission. It's similar to Quadrant Control in that we want to control table quarters. So 1, 2, 3, 4 table quarters. We want to control them at the end of each round. So actually this mission has a small advantage to going second, or actually a rather large one, in that you get the last say in who controls which zone. But let's have a think about different types of AROs first before we dive too deeply into that. So we're playing this mission called Supremacy. We want to control zones, and we want to stop our opponent who is going first. Panda, what kind of AROs would you be thinking about for a mission like this, or in general?
First of all, it all depends on the context. So maybe we could first briefly talk about the goals for reactive turn.
Let's do that
overall. And so I would divide them between main goals and secondary goals. The main goals, of course, being the priority, and secondary goals are something that are nice to accomplish, but something that you don't want to compromise your main goals by trying to
do.
Succeed in secondary goals. And of course, depending on the mission, depending on which turn the game is currently at, the priorities can shift.
I agree.
But for most missions and against the first turn of your opponent who is going first, I would say the two main goals are make your opponent to waste orders and protect your own units.
Yeah.
Because even though there are many things you can do on reactive turn, Infinity is a game that is still played on active turn. The active player makes the decisions. It gets to decide which firefights they want to engage in. So basically, you're not going to find yourself in advantageous positions on reactive turn because unless your opponent makes a mistake.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why you want to save as much of your orders and your forces for your active turn. to have more options then.
Yeah, I agree. So our primary goal most of the time in the reactive turn is to waste the opponent's time and to preserve our forces. A secondary goal for me would be to make things too order intensive. So you've set up such a lot of AROs, or you've set up in such a way that the opponent can't achieve what they want to achieve. So on this mission, for example, I'll just give a very quick example. There are 4 buttons, one here, one here, one here, and one here. In terms of wasting time and making things order inefficient, we might say protect this button so much that the opponent can't press it with the orders they have remaining. But again, that's all secondary, as Panda said, to keeping your models alive and just sort of slowing the opponent down. Because as we've discussed, the active turn is really strong. They're shooting with their full burst. You're usually shooting with burst 1 or maybe burst 2. So you're disadvantaged in the reactive turn. Any other secondary
exactly.
goals?
So I can just briefly add to that if you can stop your opponent from completing objectives like pressing buttons in this mission, it's great. If you can at the same time keep your own models alive, but in most cases and in most missions, at the beginning of the game, it's better to let your opponent press consoles freely than to expose your models too much. A secondary goal is to kill enemy models. Of course, this is a thing that the opponent gets to decide whether they want to risk their own models. So that's why it's only a secondary goal. On active turn, it would be a main goal. But in some cases, on reactive turn, you can force your opponent to make trades. Of course, the trades will be usually advantageous to your opponent, but they still might have to sacrifice some of their attacking models.
Yeah. So to achieve a trade, we might put units with templates in the way of our opponent. And of course, if our opponent then has to, let's say, move into their area, they're going to walk into a template, so they might end up achieving what they want, but also dying at the same time. So that would be an example of a trade. Or, for example, they could kill your unit and lose their unit as well. That would be a trade. But remember, this is all secondary. Our primary goal is just to slow down the opponent. We just want to waste their time, and we want to make sure that you take as few losses as possible. Things are going to die in the reactive turn. Usually it's going to be a phenomenal turn if you lose nothing, but we want to really minimize that to just, maybe 1 or 2 models. Then you're doing pretty well, I would say.
Yes, that's true. And as a last secondary goal, I would say it's to set yourself up for good active turn. So have your models in positions where you don't have to yourself waste too many orders going after your opponent or to complete objectives.
Yeah. So make sure your stuff is in a good position to start the next turn. Okay. So with that being said, those are our general goals. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Shall we move on to just having a quick look at your list and what you've deployed?
Yes. So we can start. Let's start from your left, which is going to be my right.
Sure. Let's have a look.
So on up here, we have one Longya. It's obvious that it's Longya, even though it has a camo.
Yeah.
And because it's in the second group, you also did you know that this is most probably the mine of Longya.
Yeah, so this is a defensive piece with mine layer. It has Panzerfaust, Flammen Spears, camouflage, but it's a little bit, it doesn't have a high burst gun, so we're not too worried about it in the active turn.
Yeah, it's mostly a narrow piece, but also because of forward deployment, it is already in the zone, so it brings its points to the zone. And on the other side of the game table, we have another Longya, exactly in a similar position.
Oh yeah, very similar position here.
Yeah, and maybe we can actually go to the second group first. Okay. And there's another mine from the other Longya, most likely there. Then on the back, right here, we have one camo marker alone. And if you know anything about Yujing, we can be quite sure that this is a dying lieutenant who has an extra lieutenant order.
Yeah, very common.
Then we have of course, a set of Guangxis. So there's one Guangxi protecting the lieutenant. There is one Guangxi here. Yeah. And third Guangxi here. And their controllers is standing here.
Great. Okay.
Then also on the backfield, we have Missile Bot.
Yep, there's the missile.
And then we have here we have the engineer,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a 1 health per bot on the other side of the table, so
Okay,
it's there to potentially fix the long yaws
that
if
makes
necessary,
sense. Mm-hmm.
or the Dokkaebi who is here. And then we also have a couple of cow markers here, -3 here and 0 here.
Mm-hmm.
Any player who has played a little bit more Infinity knows that that is a Liberto.
Yep. So
There isn't really anything else it can be.
yeah. So if you see an S2 -3 next to an S2 0, and they're both camouflaged, it's extremely likely to be a Liberto.
Yeah, and Liberto's mine.
Yeah.
There. Then there's one Shaolin monk
Okay.
here, and motorized bounty hunter here.
Yeah.
With Red Fury.
Yeah.
And if you count the models, you know that there's 13 models on a table.
Sure.
And Yujing is keeping 1 model in reserve, so you know that there's also going to be 1 hidden deployment model or
Sure.
1 AD trooper.
Great. Okay. So this is probably a lot to take in as a deployment, but I think what we want to focus on initially is the dangerous stuff here, the stuff that's probably going to be attacking into you. So what's your opinion here? I mean, this is a list you designed, Panda. So what are you most likely to move forwards in the first turn?
Yeah, this is also, of course, a bit tricky question because there are 2 models that you can see, and those 2 models are likely models that I would attack with.
Mm-hmm.
But what we see here, most of these models are not actually really threats like Guangxi's, Long Ya's.
Mm-hmm.
They're not something that I would spend orders on active turn.
Mm-hmm.
But if we start with the threats, on the left side we have the motorized bounty hunter. It's a pretty good and cheap mid-range shooter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That can get up to your deployment zone fast.
Yeah.
It's not super dangerous, but something that you need some way to deal with.
Yeah.
Although Hak Islam definitely has tools to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
What is more dangerous, however, is the Dokkaebi here.
This guy, yeah.
Because it has a pitcher and also pretty decent weapon, MK12 with marksmanship.
Yeah.
And if you look at the map, the Dokkaebi can quite freely advance at least all the way to this building.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's already in pitcher range.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of the main threats that you can see at the moment.
Okay.
That you can have to be able to deal with.
Okay. So can I just break this down as a defending player? So this is what I would see after Panda has deployed his Yujing. As the defending player, and I'd agree that we worry about the bounty hunter here because it's fast, it's got a high burst weapon in the Red Fury, it's got mimetism, so it also has booty, so it's reasonably good on the attack, and it is probably going to win a lot of face-to-face rolls. The reason why I'm a bit less worried about the bounty hunter is because it only has 1 wound and it doesn't dodge very well, so mines and things like that might be quite good against it. The second threat that Panda spoke about, this Dokkaebi here, we would worry about this because it's a quite good shooter, BS11, but it has marksmanship, so it ignores cover. So it's sort of BS14. It's got a strong gun in the Mark 12. It also has 2 wounds, it has 1 wound and then no wound incapacitation. It's also a hacker, and it has pitchers, so it can shoot repeaters across the board. And of course, at that point, we need to talk about the third threat, which is the guided missile launcher, because once the opponent has put pitchers near to your deployment zone, they can start spotlighting things and using the guided missile. So those are the 3 things that I initially see in Panda's list that I'm a bit worried about.
Yeah, and as a 4th thing, I would also point out the Liberto here, who could have a pretty nice pathway to walk right here all the way to your deployment zone, and because of his camouflage, it gets to avoid usually at least 1 arrow. You can discover, but it can just move through if you don't have additional arrows there. So as a defending player, you need to be aware of that and find a way to stop Liberto.
So the Liberto only has 1 wound. It can get a bit stuck once it reaches the DZ, but it's very cheap and it has camouflage, so as Panda said, it's likely to get in and be able to do something.
Yes, there are of course ways to deal with Liberto as well. It's just that you have to plan your defense
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
Cool.
And then even though you don't see anything else,
Mhm.
there's one model in reserve, one in hidden deployment, or an AD
Yeah.
trooper. But if you have played against Yujing a lot, or you're otherwise familiar with Yujing, you probably can expect that most likely there is going to be a Hakta in my list, or at least another long-range shooter, because currently you don't see any long-range weapons
Right.
deployed here.
Yeah.
And if it's it might be something else from the reserve, but most likely a Hakta. And if there's a Hakta here, it can be already deployed. It can be anywhere on the field in my deployment zone. So when you're setting up your arrows as a defending player, you have to be aware that even though you don't see the threat, it's probably somewhere there, and you need to deploy accordingly so that the Hakta doesn't get any easy kills wherever it may appear from.
This is a really important lesson for those of you who are struggling with second turn, which is that just because you don't see the enemy's HMG on the board does not mean they don't have one. It's very likely that their reserve model or a hidden deployment model is the one with the long-range weapon. So do not use this kind of deployment here as an excuse to deploy things in the open, because if they drop that reserve, or if there's a hidden deployed HMG, you are going to have a very bad time if you haven't hidden your models well.
Yes, exactly. And maybe we could also say a couple of words about the map design itself. So if we're looking at this from the defending player's perspective, there's this one large building in the middle that basically divides this map into two different sides. And then these two different sides are also kind of divided by these buildings into two sections. So basically there are 4 pathways to attack from.
So
there's like one up here,
and then
another that goes like straight there, one that comes from up here, and then one last one that goes like here.
Yeah, I agree. So immediately we're starting to think about how is the opponent going to approach me? This is really useful in a lot of maps. Just think about, imagine sort of roadways, like which kind of angles is the opponent going to attack from? Which routes are they going to take? And we can identify 4 on this map. Cool.
Yes, and now you already see that the motorized bounty hunter is here, so it's likely going to attack from this way. So you need to set up something that can block the bounty hunter on this side. On the other side, you can see Liberto and Dokkaebi, so you want to set up some arrows that can protect at least against them.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense.
Usually, it's good to try to protect all the different attacking pathways, at least in some way.
Yeah, at the very least with a mine or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So shall we look at your deployment next?
Yeah. So I did a quick Hack Islam deployment. If you wouldn't mind loading that up, Panda, so we can have a look. My deployment was a little bit rough and ready, but let's have a look. Which side shall we start with here?
Maybe we can I have categorized arrows into different types of arrows.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe we can use that categorization to walk through your deployment, going through every model.
Great.
And also then talk about the general concepts that are related to
why
those
not?
types of
That
arrow
sounds
models.
right. Cool.
And as a disclaimer, this is not the only or the correct way to categorize arrows. It's just a framework that helps in analyzing your arrows and your deployment. So you can just feel free to do it your own way if that helps you. And also would like to highlight that there is no perfect deployment. You always have to make compromises when you deploy. So it is impossible to, we talked about the goals in the beginning of the video. So it's always difficult to do all of those. You have to make compromises.
Yeah.
But as the first category, I have hard arrows.
Yeah.
So hard arrows are units that have potential to stop any enemy units. In Hack Islam, you don't really have hard arrows. So this could be something like Solar Reaction Atalanta, Suryat HRL, or some really strong models. But this is also situational. You have to take in the context. So in some cases, Azrael could be a hard arrow, depending on what it's facing. But in this case, there's probably a Hakta on a table, and Hakta will just eat Azrael alive. So that makes Azrael not really as a hard arrow. But even a model like fully core-linked Suryat HRL, if it's facing a cutter, it goes a bit soft.
Yeah. So let's just qualify that statement a bit more. So hard AROs are usually big pieces with guns that can sort of face off against a real big variety of threats. Hard AROs tend to be a little bit ineffective on the first turn because the opponent has all of their resources available, and as we said earlier, it's easier to attack than it is to defend. But you can see how this Azrael has an AP HMG. It has continuous damage on the HMG, which is really, really something. So in a game where my opponent wasn't playing a long-range gun, let's say, for example, they don't have a hack tower with an HMG, or they're just not playing an HMG, this Azrael would be terrifying. Of course, we're on turn 1. My opponent probably does have an HMG, so I've hidden it. But if it died, or if something happened, I'd probably position this Azrael in a more exposed place, possibly. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And so when you have a hard arrow, a model that you are comfortable engaging any enemy models, even in reactive turn, you usually want to place them in position where they can see as much of the table as possible. So on this table, examples would be like this location here, this tower here, maybe this location here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But before doing that, you always have to be aware of what kind of models your opponent might bring to the table.
Yeah. So
and to know whether your models can actually stand up to them.
So hard arrows might be things like a Kamau if you play Pan-Oceania in a link team. So it's burst 2 in arrow, really high ballistic skill, has MSV, has mimetism, quite destructive weapon in the multi-sniper. Could alternatively be a Riot Girl if you play Nomad, similar thing, has MSV, high BS, high armor, that kind of thing. Now, as we've said, these are both fantastic examples of hard arrows and could have a dominant position, but you still have to be careful. If your opponent brings a tag or something like that, they could get through it, so they can be quite variable. If my opponent said to me they were playing Pan-Oceania or a typical tag faction, I might be a bit more hesitant to deploy my hard arrows.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it always depends on the situation.
Yes, yeah, it does.
Then we have soft arrows, and of course, there is no clear distinction between hard arrows and soft arrows. It's more of a spectrum, depending on the situation. But a soft arrow, we have, for example, they could be a flash pull spots or long yas that I have on Eugene side.
Yeah.
And you have one flash pull spot here.
Yeah.
And usually, soft arrows are models that have potential to slow down an enemy, but they are also easy targets for the best enemy units.
Yeah.
So in this case, if the Eugene has an Hakta or another opponent who have another good HMG, they can just easily with one order usually kill the flash pull spot. So you don't want to deploy it in a way that it can be seen from your opponent's side of the table.
Yeah. So soft arrows might cover little areas, not really large areas.
Yeah, and usually areas that are closer to your own deployment zone. Yeah. So you force your opponent to come close to your side of the table to see them. And I think this is a really good example of how to use soft arrows. So you have flash pull spot here. I can't see it anywhere from my side of the table.
Yeah.
You have this, you're covering this long fire lane here.
Indeed.
So whatever comes from this side of the table will be seen at some point by the flash pull spot. At least before I get into your deployment zone. You can also see this small line here.
Exactly.
Which is also in good range for the flash pull spot.
Note here as well, the flash pull spot is very cheap. It's not a very important unit to my strategy. I'm happy exposing it a little bit because if it does die, that's a shame, but it doesn't really matter that much. On the other hand, the Azrael might be more destructive, might be a better arrow, but if it dies, it's a big problem for me. So that's why this is hidden. And the cheaper but softer flash pass bot is exposed.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. And when your opponent advances to your side of the table, it will start to see some of your models at some point in any way. So it is better for them to see, or it's better for you that they see flash pool spot first, and they have to deal with them before getting into your more expensive models. Although of course you don't want to sacrifice a flash pool spot. It's still like one regular order.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's important.
So we said earlier that one of the goals of the reactive turn is to waste time. I don't want my flash pass bot to die, but if my opponent has to spend maybe 1-2 orders killing a flash pass bot, and that means they're not killing something else, that's a really good example of slowing them down. I've just wasted a bit of their time, essentially.
Yeah, and maybe just briefly, as another example of soft arrows, we can take a look at the long yaws on the Eugene side.
Yeah, let's have a look at these.
They are deployed a bit more aggressively, so they are seeing all the way to the Hockey Slam deployment zone, but they have camo, so the Hockey Slam player will need to spend an order to try to discover them first before you can engage them. So in those cases, you can be a bit more aggressive.
Yeah, so you're more likely to waste the opponent's time if you have camouflage. It just takes a bit longer to, discover and then shoot, essentially.
Yeah, and they're also potentially a bit more dangerous because they have Panzerfausts instead of flash pulls. Although flash pulls can be really dangerous if your opponent spends their entire turn. For example, if I have something like Zhujian, it comes somewhere here and I try to attack this position. And then the flash pull spot stuns to Zhujian. That's basically my whole turn.
Yeah, I've wasted a lot of orders at that point.
Yeah. So flash pulls in some situations are excellent arrows as well, or arrow weapons. But besides the flash pull spot, you don't have any other soft arrows, really?
Not really. I have some different types of arrows, though. I've got a hacker here in camouflage.
Yeah, maybe we can move to zone of control arrows next.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Zone of control arrows are arrows that need no line of fire.
Yep.
And they have 8-inch reach. So that's quite self-explanatory.
Yeah.
And this hacker here is a really good example. So I'll have a hacker.
Yep. So just to reveal this is a hacker
next to the console. And I think this is a perfect example of how to use a zone of control arrow. So if you think about the main goals or objectives, waste opponent's time, protect your models. To engage this Alhava here, the Eugene player needs to come all the way into the building here or go around the building this side to be able to see, because it's hiding behind the console.
Absolutely.
And also it has a camouflage, so it will still need to be discovered even if I get there.
Yeah, so it's a camouflage marker as well.
Yeah. What is even better is that because of the 8-inch hacking area, your hacking area reaches to here and to here.
Yeah.
So basically covering this whole side of the table with one hacker that is really hard to get to. And whatever hackable models that I have, I basically cannot attack from this side of the table because, or at least as long as the Alhava hacker is there.
Yeah. So the reason I put the Al-Hawa here is I saw the Dokaibi, who's a good hacker. I didn't want to put my hacker in the way of an enemy hacker that's really good, but I suspected this is Eugene. They like their heavy infantry. They might run something hackable. So I'm going to go and put my hacker in a really annoying place as far away from their killer hacker as I can. Essentially, that was my thinking. Also note, this mission scores for buttons, so it's a really good idea to put a specialist next to a button that also AROs.
And also the hacker is already in the scoring zones.
Yeah.
So you have 26 points in that quadrant.
Absolutely.
So surely this is a perfect deployment for the Alhava hacker.
Yeah. Cool.
Other zone of control arrows you have
this one and that one here.
You have the buried hacker here.
I do.
This is pretty basic deployment. It's well hidden. You still are projecting a small hacking threat to like this area here. So if something hackable comes there, and what is important here is that if there's something that is hackable comes up here, unless it has stealth, you will have chance to hack it before it can go around the corner.
Yes.
The buried.
This is a little bit of a high level strat, but it's also important to this. I have deployed a mine here from the Liberto in the hope that if something comes around and dodges the mine, it might well break stealth, and in doing so it opens itself up to a hack. I don't know if that's something that's a bit complicated to explain, but stealth units obviously can't be hacked if they move because they're stealthy, but dodging breaks stealth, so sometimes it's really worthwhile putting mines near to hackers, because if someone dodges the mine, they break stealth.
That's a really good point. And in general, we can talk about this later more, but it's really good to combine arrows.
Yeah.
So putting different kind of arrows together that can together tackle, if not all, at least most type of enemy models.
Yeah.
And also related to that, as the third zone control arrow, you have the Muttavia here.
Yes, I do.
So it has a jammer. So basically anything that comes up here or here will have to survive the jammer. And you already mentioned that there's a mine here.
There is indeed, yeah.
So basically one of my main threats was a Liberto here. If Liberto comes here, it has to dodge the mine, which it can do. But if it dodges the mine, you have the Muttavia that can jam
exactly that
the Liberto. Yeah. So basically, as a Eugene player, I would need to either deal with the mine or Muttavia first, or otherwise Liberto is pretty much blocked.
Yeah, yeah.
Where it is.
The other thinking here, of course, is that the Dokaibi is a hacker. It might want to get into the zone of control of my models, so I want to put a jammer down so that if it's in my zone of control, I'm in its zone of control, I can jam it before it does too much damage. So that was my thinking here.
Yeah, that is also a really good point, because Dokaibi is a killer hacker.
Yep.
Otherwise, it could just move here,
exactly.
Kill the Barid.
Yep.
Even though there's a mine, it has
2 wounds,
so it can survive the mine. It can maybe shoot the Liberto first.
Yep.
So here's a Liberto.
Yep.
But because you have the hacker there, I can't come that close with Dokaibi.
Yep.
I could perhaps come like somewhere here, fire a pitcher there, and then through the pitcher kill the Barid, but Barid is still only a 17-point model.
Exactly.
And I would waste orders and a pitcher killing Barid, and you have nothing other valuable here.
No, not at all. And it's also not even my only hacker. So
yeah. So if I would put a pitcher there to kill the Barid, I think you would be happy that I do that, because that's inefficient use of my orders and my resources.
Absolutely.
And
I think that's it for zone of control. There's a sort of kind of half zone of control one here.
Yeah, we can maybe talk about that a bit later, because that's kind of a special case that has like multiple different sides to it. But the next type of arrows that we have are corner guards. So these are models that have template weapons.
Yeah.
And they're usually cheap models that are bad trades for the active player. So a good example here is Liberto.
Yep.
Here, other examples are, for example, Guangxis, and also both Guangxis and Libertos are also dogged, so it might take a couple of orders to kill them.
Yeah. So I have dogged, I have a template. It's just going to be a bit annoying to kill this model, basically.
Actually, one small change that I would make is that, maybe you forgot it, but I would put Liberto prone, because I think Liberto would be visible like over this.
Yeah, sorry, it should be prone.
Blue thing. But otherwise, this is also a pretty good deployment for Liberto. So basically, you're blocking this area and this area. You can even take a shot like here if I decide to go from there. And again, you are making life of my Liberto and life of my Dokaibi more difficult with having Liberto there.
Yeah.
So I think you have in general, you have a really solid defense here with mine, Liberto, the Gazi Muttavia.
And
they're all like, and the Barid, they're all really cheap models.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be at least a bit difficult for the Dokaibi and Liberto to achieve any great things on that side of the table.
So what I did here really was I stacked up a couple of different things just to make his life harder, and that's it really on the left. Yeah.
Yeah. And to expand a little bit more about the concept of corner guards, in reserve you have FIDE,
I do.
but FIDE is, even though it has a template weapon, I would not consider FIDE a corner guard because it's a bit too expensive for that. So it actually would be a good trade for the active player to go after FIDE if the
Yes.
FIDE was without the impersonation state.
Yes. So we want our corner guards to be a bit cheaper, really.
Yeah. Otherwise, they are targets instead of corner guards.
Yeah. The thing we haven't discussed is the Nadir, which wouldn't be on the table, of course, because it's hidden deployment.
Yeah. There's also like one category before Nadir, which I have named situational or opportunistic arrows.
Okay. Yeah.
So these are non-traditional arrow units that have also that also have arrow potential in very specific situations. So usually it's our models that are used primarily on active turn. But I think like all models in Infinity have some arrow potential.
Yes. Yeah.
And that you should try to get most of that potential out. So as an example of situational or opportunistic arrow, we have, for example, the Mukhtar here.
Yep.
Of course, the main goal for your Mukhtar has been to hide it.
Yep.
From the Eugene player, from myself. And it's pretty well hidden there, but you're still covering this like small far lane here.
Absolutely.
So, for example, if the motorized bounty hunter decides to come up here, I have to engage first with Mukhtar. And also, another example is the Azrael. So, instead of being hard arrow, in this matchup, it's more of a situational arrow, and it's also covering the same far lane here.
Yeah, it's a very thin line there. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also covering the Mukhtar. So the bounty hunter might actually want to go after the Mukhtar, but it would need to engage the Azrael first, and it definitely doesn't want to take a firefight against the Azrael.
Yeah.
Because
that Red Fury is probably not going to be very effective against the armor 8 of this Azrael.
Yeah, 5+ cover armor 8. I mean, the bounty hunter will likely win the face-to-face. With enough orders, it might even manage to kill the Azrael. But it's not really efficient use of orders. It
Absolutely
would probably
not.
take
And there is
the Eugene player's turn.
There's a doctor next to it as well. So in terms of efficiency, it's going to be really hard for the Eugene player to do that efficiently because I can stand it up quite reasonably reliably. Although I think the doctor is slightly misplaced, but we can talk about that a bit later.
Yeah, maybe we can go to the Asavira doctor next because it's also what I would categorize as a situational arrow. It has a light shotgun AP rifle, so it's a quite decent short range arrow if it's not engaging anything powerful. But I think this is the first time that I see a mistake in your deployment. And there are actually a couple of issues with the deployment of Asavira. First of all, is that it might seem that it's quite well safe there, but when you take a look at from the Eugene player side, it's actually visible from like up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, even the Longya here can already see the Asavira.
Yeah.
But Asavira is also visible from up here. So if I decide to bring a big weapon like the Hakta up here, I can also see Asavira from there. So it's actually not very safe. And it will be in bad range for the Asavira. So Asavira is basically forced to dodge.
Yeah. So it only has a rifle. It does not want to be seen from those ranges.
Yeah. even the dog guy, we can take some like shots at Asavira from there. Of course, you could, if you survive the shooting, like you're probably going to, you can pay your guts to the stairs, and you will be safe there. But it's still an unnecessary risk, and if in worst case, you might take a couple of wounds against something like Hakta or Bologna. And the other issue is that you are not really in a good position for your own active turn because the Longya sees you there. So if you want to move out of this position, like you, of course, want to move at some point, you will have to deal with the Longya first, or otherwise it's a really big risk.
Well, actually,
trying to dodge Longya out of cover.
It's a nightmare, actually, because it would usually be in a duo with the Azrael, so it's in a fire team. So I'd probably want to activate the Azrael to kill the Longyar. But of course, if I do that, the Asawira also activates and would get hit. So actually, I probably wouldn't want to form that fire team, or I'd want to break it immediately, which is a bit of a disaster.
Can they be in a duo?
I believe so.
Okay, I've always played Asavira in a duo with Mukhtar.
Yeah, I've
Kiri,
done
but
that as well many times, yeah.
yeah, that's actually interesting. I didn't know that.
I don't know if they. I'm going to double check that, but it certainly can duo with a couple of things.
Yeah.
Oh no, you can't with the Azrael. I apologize, but it can with the
Yeah.
Mukhtar, which I've done before.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so I
I was
believe they
confused
would
with the
be a-
Fasid. You can do it with the
Yeah.
Fasid.
Yeah, no worries. But I believe they would be in a duo.
Yeah.
But then if you want to go somewhere with the Mukhtar, you either have to break the link or
Yeah.
then deal with the threats that
Yeah.
Asavira is facing first. So instead of this position, I would probably deploy Asavira maybe somewhere here.
Yeah.
Even though it's closer to the Eugene player, it's
Yeah,
actually
so
more safe
Could
there.
have been like here or something. And it's quite happy there with its shotgun.
Yeah,
and rifle.
now it's much better range for the Asavira, so it can see like up this lane here. So
Yeah.
if something comes up there, it's good range for Asavira. Asavira's BS14
Yeah.
with the rifle and light shotgun. It's also 2 wounds, armor 4.
Yep.
So it is unlikely that I can like only thing is something like Sujian if I can get there. If I have that in my list, that could threaten Asavira, but it's pretty safe there.
There's
of course,
also
another
the
threat.
picture threat as well.
Yeah, the pitcher threat is another thing. But even if Asavira is here, I could fire the pitcher
to there.
all the way there.
Yeah.
And then all these 3 expensive models would be in the
covered
hacking
anyway.
area.
Yeah, it hasn't changed either way, has it really? So
yeah,
it's fine.
So just to conclude these situational arrows, you want to take the most out of their arrow potential, but you want to keep them safe because they are models that you want to spend your orders on active turns, so you don't want them to die. So it's really trying to balance those both objectives, and also you want to set up in places where they are in a good position for your active turn, so that you don't have to waste too many orders bringing them up to do things you want to achieve on your active turn.
Yeah.
And then maybe before going on to Nadir, we could also talk about what I would call non-arrow units. So these are models that, although they have some arrow potential, you don't want to arrow with.
Yeah.
And a good example are lieutenants and their decoys, or maybe net rods. And here you have 2 gulams.
I do. I've got one here.
One gulam there, one gulam there.
Yep.
So these are models that one of them is your lieutenant, another is a decoy, pretending to be a lieutenant or a possible lieutenant. So you want to, of course, they can shoot if something comes close. Like this is this could shoot like somewhere here if something comes up. But you don't really want to take firefights with your potential lieutenants.
No. But it has a shotgun. It could if it had to.
Yeah, but that also means that someone will be able to shoot that.
Yeah.
And which is not great. You also have the missile bot here.
I do.
The missile bot actually could be used as a situational arrow instead. Currently, it's just safe here, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with this deployment.
Yeah.
If you wanted to use it more as an arrow, you could, for example, deploy it here where this gulam is.
Yes.
It would be slightly more exposed, but you would see this long fire lane
across lane
here.
Yeah.
And it still would be relatively safe there. Then you have Suleika. Suleika could work as a corner guard.
Yeah, I sometimes use her as a corner guard if things are getting a bit rough.
However, on this map, on your side of the table, because of her large base, you can basically only deploy her there or there.
Yeah.
If the Suleika was there, it would act more as a corner guard to protect also this gulam.
Yeah.
But you already have the body there. There's not really space to put them both there.
No.
And for your active turn, I think it's easier for Zuleika to attack from this side.
Yes, I think this
And
is the
also-
better side. Yeah.
And also another point is that your two smokes are Zuleika and the Gazi Mutavia
Absolutely.
here. It's good to have smokes on both sides of the table, so you have more coverage.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
also your Mukhtar Fury is here. So if you, for some reason, need smoke for the Mukhtar, you have Zuleika close
Yeah.
by.
Yeah. So when setting up my defense and my AROs, I wanted the jammer here, and I knew I wanted it here to oppose the hacker that you had. But then I thought the exact same thing as you. Well, the Ghazi, the Mutawir is one of my two smoke sources. So if I put one smoke on the left, I really need to put my other smoke on the right. So that means that Zuleika sort of placed herself once I decided that the Mutawir wanted to be here.
Yeah, that's really good thinking. So I think at this point, we have talked about all other models except the Nadir.
Yeah.
And then in reserve, you have Fide.
Yeah.
But we can talk about it when you're deploying or after I have placed my reserve on the table.
To be honest, I'd probably largely ignore the Fide for ARO purposes, for the most part, mostly.
Actually, I wouldn't, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Later.
Okay.
So there are also some arrows that cannot be neatly fitted into any of the categories that I have mentioned. And anyway, the categories are somewhat arbitrary anyway. And I would say Nadir and other hidden deployment arrows are like that.
Yeah.
And the really special thing about hidden deployment is that unlike all other arrows, this is the only time and chance when, as a reactive player, you actually get to make decisions.
Absolutely.
You get to decide when you reveal, and that's the only time when you can have advantageous face-to-face on a reactive turn. Like even if your opponent doesn't make a mistake, of course, like if your opponent makes a bad mistake, you might have an advantageous face-to-face, but you can't really base your game. Yeah, you can't base your game plan on your opponent making mistakes. So do you want to talk about the deployment of your Nadir?
Yeah, I do.
Placed here.
So I had initially I'd put it here, which looks like a better spot. It sees like kind of all the way over here, I think, depending on its height. I'm pretty sure it sees over this little green crate, and it sees down here as well. But there are a couple of reasons I didn't do that. The first is I think my opponent probably has an HMG. An HMG shooting at a Nadir is going to take a long time. I have Mimetism 6, but then I remembered Eugene has access to a Mimetism 6 HMG, so, they will win that fight eventually, so the more exposed position probably wasn't right. The other thing I wanted to do was to cover the hacker, and I'll talk about that now. So this hacker here is screening out hackable units, essentially heavy infantry, tags and remotes, and it has a zone of control that covers here and here. So if my opponent puts down a scary hackable piece like a Sujan or a tag or something like that, it's probably going to want to clear out this hacker first, at the very least, or it's just going to go onto the other side of the table. But let's say it does go on this side. What I wanted to do was to say, actually, if this bounty hunter moves up and tries to discover my Al-Hawa, I'm actually going to reveal this Nadir, possibly with the bounty hunter out of cover, maybe, depending on where it gets to, and I'm going to take a shot at the bounty hunter to keep the hacker alive, and we keep the hacker alive so that it can zone out the Sujan. That's quite a complicated series of events, but does that make sense?
Yes, that totally makes sense. And I think if the bounty hunter wants to engage the Al-Hawa, it basically has to go past this point.
Exactly.
Where it will be out of cover and it will be good range for you.
Exactly.
Of course, the bounty hunter has mimetism, so it's still only 12s to hit. But that is the face-to-face that you are probably likely to win. If the bounty hunter shoots back and it's within 24, it's shooting on 6s.
Yeah.
So I would have to actually calculate that. but it's pretty good defense for the Alhava.
Yeah, I think it's
against the
certainly
bounty hunter.
enough for the bounty hunter to not be happy with that situation.
Yes. That's a really good point. And you also are covering basically this area here, but you're
Yeah.
also seeing here.
A little bit to there, yeah.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things I want to talk about with this Nadir and
Go ahead.
like
Yeah.
concepts in general. So in a normal situation, I think this would be a really good deployment for the Nadir. It's not too exposed, but it's also protecting your own models.
Yes.
And when we talk about the overall goals for reactive turn, protect your own units is one of them, and that doesn't only mean that place your models in a way that they are hidden, but also use your other models to protect the next model.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a good example of that. However, I might want to change this deployment because of two reasons.
Go ahead.
First of all, we're playing a mission of supremacy, where you need to get points on the middle of the table, and Nadir has forward deployment, so
it does.
Yeah, so you could deploy it already into the scoring zones and add its 24 points there.
Yeah.
The other reason is that when you think about the Yujing and what kind of models it has that it uses to attack, the motorized bounty hunter is pretty much the only one that Nadir can actually comfortably engage with.
Yes.
And even against the bounty hunter, it's 4 times on 6s versus 1s on 12s. So it's not sure to win that face-to-face or to kill. Other targets, it's not going to do anything against Hakta.
No.
If I have maybe Sujian or something like that, they have too much armor and wounds for the Flamen Spear to be allowed to do damage.
Yeah.
Even the Dokkaebi has a 50% chance, or not 50, but I think 45% chance of saving against the, if I'm not mistaken, Arm 3.
Arm 3.
I would need to roll 15s. No, I would need to roll a 12, so 40% chance to survive. So, and I have 2 wounds.
Yeah.
And the Dokkaebi would shoot back if it's on good range. It would shoot back on 8s. So that's also somewhat 50-50.
Yeah, it's a bit of a coin toss.
Face-to-face. Yeah. And if you can shoot Liberto without Liberto's camo, that's great. But at least in the beginning, Liberto has camo.
Yeah.
So there are not actually that many good targets for the Nadir.
No.
Which is another reason I could use it more as a model who is in the zones, controlling the zones, and then use it as an arrow only if there's a really dire situation where you really need to slow down.
Okay, so where would you put it to be a bit more aggressive?
There are a couple of spots. One would be here.
Yeah, okay.
So if the Nadir is in this corner, it can see this kind of like narrow fire lane here.
That's
where
true.
It sees also into this building. So if I use the Dokkaebi, for example, to go to press this button, or if I want to move up closer somewhere here to for some pictures,
it will see
then
that
you
corner.
can reveal the Nadir, shoot the Dokkaebi, and in that case, the Dokkaebi will be bad range for Dokkaebi, so it will have to make some difficult decisions at that point. It's also a very narrow fire lane, like somewhere there. It's probably not gonna matter, but in some cases, something might end up there.
Yeah.
And the important thing is that it's already in the zone.
That's
Another
true.
position would be this spot here. In this case, you would have fire lane going up here, but also up here to the enemy deployment zone.
Yeah.
And in this room, so if Dokkaebi moves forward, and when you're analyzing the Yujing deployment, one of the main threats is the Dokkaebi and its pitcher.
And it might well press this button and then walk forwards. So if I was here, I would see that immediately. Yeah,
that's a good observation. Actually, my point while deploying the Dokkaebi is that because of a 6-2 movement, I can take one movement here to press the button, then another movement to go here, and I'm already in a position where I can fire some features
Exactly.
from.
Yeah.
But if you have the nadir here, you can already see me in this position, which would be good range for you.
Yeah.
And you can then shoot if you are really afraid of the features, or if there's a situation where you think that the features would really hurt you a lot.
Yeah.
Then at that point you can reveal the nadir. But if it seems that your opponent is not going to have enough orders to do really bad damage with the feature, then you cannot even reveal the nadir and save it for later.
So this would allow us to deploy the Asawira further up, where obviously it's a bit more exposed to pictures. What we can do to cover that is move the nadir from this conservative position here to this slightly more aggressive position. If the Dokaibi then does move up to get some pictures to kill my heavy infantry or to hack my heavy infantry, the nadir here is ready to see into this building and counter that play. The Dokaibi is going to be shooting me on 8, so it'll be BS11 plus 3 up to 14s minus 6 for the mimetism, down to 8s. And 3 dice on 8s versus 1 on sort of 12 is, it's not great for the Dokaibi.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that face-to-face is quite 50-50. Because Dokaibi has better burst, even though it has lower target value. Of course, Nadir needs to do 2 wounds, while only 1 wound is enough for Dokaibi.
Absolutely.
So it's something that you necessarily don't want to take, but if the situation is like, if there's a situation where the Dokaibi could do some really bad damage, you can then slow down the Dokaibi or potentially even stop it.
Yeah.
By revealing the Nadir.
So the nadir kind of makes sense. It's hidden deployed. You reveal it when you want to, essentially. Put it in a position where it can kind of start to soak up orders if the situation really warrants it. And I think Panda's right that this position on the left is probably better because it can get closer to a scoring zone. There's one final unit I want to talk about as a sort of just-in-case ARO, and that's the Hunziker here.
I almost forgot the Hunziker. Yeah,
so
go ahead.
The Hunziker is not a traditional ARO piece. However, it's irregular and it's low point, so I don't care too much if I lose it. The reason it's here is because it's camouflaged. It does a decent impression of pretending to be a hacker, so that might, freak out a Sujan. If a heavy infantry wants to walk around here, it's pretending to be a hacker, perhaps. But what the Hunziker does particularly well is that it has deployable repeaters and it has deployable mines. So if things are going really badly for me and I am quite afraid, I can just deploy a repeater here and start hacking through it, or I can put a mine down and start, hoping to take a wound. This play might result in the Hunziker dying, but as I said, it's 18 points, it's irregular, so it doesn't even cost me an order. So it's something that I would consider if I wasn't having a very good game. Does that make sense?
I think that makes perfect sense, and I really like the deployment of Hunziker here. First of all, even though it's not a traditional ARO piece, it's quite versatile as an ARO piece. It has, like you said, light shotgun. It also has flash pulse.
It does, yeah.
So if something is out of 8 inches, you can flash pulse. It's the deployable repeater is really important. It can be used also on reactive turn.
Yes.
So one thing that we didn't really talk about this map is that this building can be quite essential because all 4 quadrants are accessible from the rooftop.
Yeah.
So whoever is in this building, with one short movement skill, it can move from any quarter to any other quarter.
Yes.
And also, it is a pretty dominant position. Like if you're talking about table control, you can see to most places on the map from here. You can basically see in various positions in both deployment zones.
Yeah.
So if I take a model like Hakta, bring it up here, I could already see some of your models here.
Absolutely.
I can even leave the Hakta here in some position to cover some angle. But if I do that, you have the Hunziker here.
Yeah.
And like you said, if situation is really desperate, if there's a Hakta that's standing up here in this corner where you can see the Hunziker, or if there's a Sujian who moves up here, ready to attack your Asavira, Mukhtar, and Asrael. When you see the enemy model, you can just put down a repeater. The Hunziker will likely die,
Yeah.
But that will block down any heavy infantry or attack
Absolutely.
while you still have hackers alive.
Yeah.
Because if they activate again, you get to isolate them.
Yeah.
Basically for free.
Yeah. I do, in terms of these sort of optional ablative AROs, the ones where you maybe don't really want to reveal them, but you can. I do obviously like it if they're irregular because they cost far less, and you lose a lot less if they die. So that's just another thing to bear in mind. I really don't mind that much if the Hunziker dies. I don't want
that
it
is
to.
also another really good point. Yeah. And just in general, your opponent, when you're defending, your opponent is likely to kill something. So it's better to sacrifice irregular models versus regular models because you don't lose the orders. And like you have deployed here, there's Liberto here, Mutabia here, and the Hunsagut here. So these are some of the first models that I have to engage with.
Yeah. So you'll notice that my front line, for the most part, is cheap irregular models. The one exception is the Al-Hawar Hacker, and currently the Al-Hawar Hacker is actually being protected by my hidden deployed model at the moment as well. So yeah, on sort of, what is it, on 3 out of 4 counts, the first model you see is irregular with the Ghazi, the Liberto, the Hunziker, and not the Al-Hawar. Yeah.
And in this kind of mission, when you need to control zones, you lose less points when irregular models die, and you also lose less orders.
Absolutely. So just to make you aware, we're kind of just over the hour mark now, Panda. I think we've covered most of what we wanted to cover today. But let's just look at the reserve. So why don't you place the aggressive reserve first, the model that you were holding back? And also, is it both a Sujan and a Haktao you're playing? I guess.
Yes, there will be a Haktao also. I can first put my Sujian on a table.
Great.
So where I would place the Sujian is just a second.
It's fine.
Oh, there's the Sujian.
Yeah. So we've got the.
So I would place in this case, I'll place the Sujian here. There's nothing really special about this deployment. I kind of would have liked to place a Sujian here, and that was my original plan.
Yeah.
To have like another attacking threat here when the dog guard is here. But because there's the Al-Hawar Hacker, I have to pivot with the Sujian and deploy it here. I'm probably quite unlikely to use the Sujian on first turn because you also have the Mutabia here. You have a hacker there.
Yep.
So it's basically here just to be used later in the game, maybe to move like somewhere here in the scoring zones, and also to keep it safe from Azrael.
But that's great. I mean, that means we've done a really good job here, right? Because you're saying, I can't really push forward with one of my most powerful infantry because those hackers, those camouflage markers and the jammer are just making it too difficult to do so.
Yeah, exactly. So Sujian is my most powerful attack piece, at least like short range attack piece, but because of your good deployment, I cannot really use it well on my first turn, so I will have to reserve it for later and use other models. Maybe before we go to your FIDE and your reserve, there are just a couple of general concepts I want to highlight.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or that are good to do at this point. Like we mentioned, some models can be sacrificed to protect others. Of course, you shouldn't make any unnecessary sacrifices. But some irregular models, especially, are sometimes good to use as sacrificial pieces to protect your other models. Like Liberto is a perfect example for that. Also, try to look for diagonal arrows. So like the flashball spot here, the Azrael here, for example, because when you have a diagonal fire lane, your opponent has to advance really far to be able to see your model. And you can still, even with long range weapons, you can still engage your opponent from range that is good for you. And also with flashball pulses, what is the best thing about them is that they can totally stop an enemy attack. So if I have some model that is walking from this area here, even though it's long range pass balls, it's not really a risk that I can take.
Yeah.
So I need to. So if it's a model like Sujian, the flash ball spot is gonna be too far away for the Sujian to shoot it. So basically, even though it's long range for the flash ball spot, it's still blocking Sujian from like going this way.
Yeah, I want to demonstrate something really quickly because I don't know if the flashball spot fits here, but just as an example, it could be tempting to put it here, right? That's a position. Let's pretend for 1 second that was legal and it fit. It could be really tempting to put the flashball spot here. It covers that same diagonal lane, which is great, so it's there at long range. But the problem with this position is that it can be seen from my opponent's deployment zone here, which makes it far too easy to kill without me really getting too much done. So the advantage of these diagonal lanes isn't just that they're long lanes. I mean, we can see lots of long lanes. We could see a long lane from here or here or lots of other positions. But it's that for the opponent to reach this particular long lane, they have to spend a lot of orders to get there first. And by that point, they've already kind of wasted their time. Whereas if I put it here, it's one order. My opponent reveals his hack towel and it probably just dies immediately. So it just doesn't do the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really well explained, the whole concept of the diagonal arrows. And as a last general concept before going to your FIDE as your reserve, I would say it's important to look out for possibilities of catastrophic failure. And this is a thing that it takes some experience to be able to do it well.
Yeah.
But what I mean by catastrophic failure is a situation where it's basically the game that is that where it's really difficult to come back from anymore.
Yeah.
So do you have any kind of such holes in your deployment that with some luck your opponent could basically dismantle you on first turn, or it could cause irreversible damage?
Yeah.
And actually at the moment I can see one possible scenario here that
what's your best case scenario?
Okay, and to explain this, I would also briefly have to go into a bit of detailed or game theory aspect of the game. When we look at your lieutenants and their decoys, this position is much better defended.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So as your opponent, I would guess that in probably 80 to 90% of the games, this is going to be your lieutenant.
Yeah, that's true.
This is the decoy. So basically, with that assumption, I can basically treat this as an open lieutenant, which doesn't really make this an efficient decoy.
No.
And in that case, I can see Azrael, Asavira, Mukhtar, and Lieutenant here.
Agree.
They are... If I put a picture somewhere there, they all would be inside hacking area.
I agree.
And a Dokkaebi can easily move up here, fire a long range picture, or even then move up somewhere here, take the mine, and fire a short range picture.
I agree.
There.
Yeah, my worst case scenario is a picture here. I agree with you entirely.
Yeah, I could then kill your lieutenant. I could Dokkaebi has only spotlight and killer hacking device, but this lieutenant could be a hacker. If it's a hacker, I could isolate Asavira and Azrael. You don't have engineers.
No.
And I could if I have orders left, I can even try to kill the Mukhtar or then kill the Asavira.
So even if you didn't know that this is the lieutenant, it is. But even if you didn't know, landing a picture here and simply killing sort of, let's say, 2 out of these 3 would make the game really, really difficult for me immediately.
Yeah, and so what I would actually shift in your deployment, I would probably take this Gulam, even though it's kind of good position, I would place it here.
Okay.
In this rooftop. Now they are close to each other, which is generally not a good thing because now a picture here, they would be both in hacking range.
Yeah.
But my only picture is here, so it's a lot more difficult for me to get a picture here than to get a picture there.
Yeah.
And secondly, now, since this is a much more safe position than the earlier position. I can now only guess that maybe 2 out of 3 games, this will be a lieutenant, and 1 out of 3, this will be a lieutenant.
Yeah.
And that would make it a lot less efficient to go after your lieutenant.
Yeah, so it would be harder to guess, essentially. One other change could be perhaps moving the Asawira as well. It could maybe go... I don't really like that because of pitches, but at least then you can't hit all 3 of my most expensive models with a single pitcher. Maybe you get one here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
You probably want to keep them in duo. One other thing that you could do is if you move the Nadir up here.
Yeah.
In that case, you can first engage the Dokkaebi. If you think that the pitcher is going down, you can first engage the Dokkaebi with Nadir, which forces the Dokkaebi to at least deal with the Nadir first, and then possibly land the pitcher. Another thing you could actually do, this is perfectly reasonable position for Azrael. You could move Azrael, which is just copy it, maybe here.
Okay.
To this spot. In which case, Azrael is still pretty well protected.
Yep.
But you would see this fire lane here.
Yeah.
So the Dokkaebi can come at least a good pitcher range.
Yep.
Otherwise, the Azrael will see it.
So one of the things we could do is just put the Azrael on the opposite side of the board to the hacker and the pitcher.
Now there are only these 2 guys in the hacking range.
Yep.
Of course, this could be there, but I cannot really be sure enough that this is your lieutenant anymore.
Yeah.
So even though this deployment is not necessarily that much better, but you avoid this one catastrophic failure situation.
Yeah. So the things that I was looking out for as a defender, firstly, I looked out for the fast threat so I could see the bike immediately. I wanted to make sure my stuff was quite hidden because I thought my opponent might have an HMG. So you notice lots of my stuff is prone, hidden behind buildings. And then the other threat I wanted to watch out for was this hacking pitches. Of course, they're repeaters that you can fire across the board. So it's really quite deadly with the guided missile launcher here. So I wanted to kind of put my stuff a bit further back and put sort of mines, jammers and my other hackers first so that they could try and stop that from occurring. And that was, all of my thoughts, essentially.
Yeah, and those are perfectly reasonable thoughts. And like what we basically done here, except the Asawira are basically just small adjustments that make your deployments just slightly better. Yeah. But in Infinity, in close games, it is usually those like small decisions that end up deciding the game.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're like pretty evenly mixed with your opponent.
Yeah. I mean, landing a pitcher that might just get you the Asawira is far less good than landing a pitcher that gets you, the Asawira and the Azrael and something else. So it's those small things that do make a massive difference.
Yes, exactly. And now if I want to get the pitcher here, if I can get Mukhtar and Asawira both in the pitcher range, it will still take a lot of orders to kill them. I might do it my first turn, it will be bad. But to be in good range for the pitcher, the Dokkaebi probably needs to go like somewhere there, where it already will be seen at least by the Nadir. If I come any closer, I would also be seen by the Azrael.
Yeah, and
then there's the mine up here.
There's the mine here as well, and the Hunziker there. So it's very possible you'd have to walk into maybe 4 AROs to do that play.
So that would essentially nullify that play.
I'll just talk about my reserve, I guess, and then we're probably done. So I will say there are 2 different versions of Fide. There's a named character Fide, who I think ARO's better because he has continuous damage, so he essentially has a flamethrower type weapon. I think he ARO's better. But you can use Fides, particularly the ones with mines, as AROs as well. Now, Fides are better in the active turn, so I'm looking at what I can assassinate quickly. Now, the Dokkaebi is going to be moving, so I don't want to sort of put the Fide near the Dokkaebi because it's going to run off anyway. I'm almost certain that's going to happen. However, one thing that my opponent probably doesn't want to move is this guided missile bot here. And if I can stop his hacking from having guided, it's significantly less effective because I can't see an actual hacker on the board. I can only see a killer hacker with Spotlight. So, I think there's probably not Oblivion. There's probably not Carbonite and things. Or there might be, but I can't see it right now. So I'd probably put the Fide like somewhere around here. I don't really know exactly where I'd put it, to be honest, so that I have a run to go against this, because I don't think my opponent's going to move it. It's very unlikely that the guided missile launcher is going to move, and it's very likely that the Fide can kill it quite cleanly in maybe, I don't know, 3 orders, maybe less, 2, 3, something like that. I'm not entirely sure. Where do you think I should put it? Maybe in here. I'm not certain. Maybe behind here, prone. I don't know. What's the willpower of a Guangxi? Is it 14? It's 13.
13, I think. Yeah, 13.
I don't want to get boxed in as well, but you've deployed your Liberto already. I'd probably just go here or something, to be honest with you.
All right.
I don't know, something like that. I'm not sure. Perhaps in here instead. I don't know.
All right. I think that would be okay deployment. However, this is at least just a personal preference, how I like to play Fides. But in these type of missions where you need to control zones, I can see like 2 possibilities how to play Fides. Otherwise would be, if you're not really concerned too much about the alpha strike of your opponent, you can just put Fide in a really safe position inside the zone. So in that case, for example, it could be in this building.
Yeah, so we could do that.
That's like one way to play Fides. You could place Fide, because there it can like move either this quadrant or this quadrant pretty easily, while still having its camo. And if you want, you can even like attack with the Fide coming down here.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, even I could just put it here, to be honest, and do the.
Yeah, you can also put the Fide there, and it will be difficult for me to deal with.
Yeah.
Fide.
It also means that your Hacktow can't really come up here, because I think the Hacktow sucks in close combat, if I remember correctly. I think it's pretty bad.
Well, at least it's not as good as Fide. If the Hacktow comes up there, I can try to discover the Fide, or I can use the Shaolin Monk to come up there and discover Fide. I think they both have willpower 14, so it's possible to do that.
Yeah.
But that will take a lot of orders, which will be good for you.
Absolutely.
And if Hacktow comes up here and I fail to discover, then Hacktow is in a pretty bad position. Because
really, really
bad. Then the Fide can attack the Hacktow. So actually, I think this building is even better than this one.
Yeah.
However, if you are really concerned about the Alpha Strike that I can do, the other way to play Fides is to use them really aggressively, which is I would make the roll for the Fide to put it like here.
Just put it right next to the guided bot.
Yeah, next to the missile bot.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a 25% chance that you fail the roll, which sucks. But in 3 out of 4 times, you make the roll and the Fide is there, and that will be really painful for me to deal with.
Yeah. I think I'd do that if I had 2 Fides. I would do that.
Yeah, even with 1 Fide, I would quite often do that if I'm concerned. And that is what makes Fide also a great ARO model, because if the Fide is here, first of all, I cannot use the missile bot, because the Fide will just kill the missile bot. I need to deal with the Fide first.
Yeah.
And that basically nullifies my GML threat.
Absolutely.
Pretty completely.
So one of the things we said about AROs was, of course, that we want to waste time, right? And if I put this Fide here, I waste a lot of Panda's time, because he's going to think, well, I either can't GM out or I need to go and dig this out before I do anything else.
Yeah, so here, if the Fide is there in cover, the only... actually, I think this side is probably better, because the Guangxi could see the Fide there.
Yeah,
now the only thing that can see the Fide is the Bounty Hunter.
Yeah.
But it has only willpower 12, so I would discover the Fide even on a good range on 6s, so it's quite unlikely to happen. Nothing else can really see. I would maybe have to take the Guangxis all the way here,
Yeah.
which is really inefficient use of my orders. And I would need to discover the FIDE twice.
Yeah. Before you do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can. I mean, sometimes it depends on how you want to play the FIDE. I think we've presented lots of different choices. You can either just use it to play the mission, so we could sort of put it up here, and it can just go into zones. If we want it to have a bigger ARO reactive effect, as Panda said, you can roll and put it next to the bot. Then they have to deal with it, and in so doing, they waste orders. You can do some approximation of that by putting it somewhere like here. Again, the bounty hunter's probably going to be the first one to see it. He can move the Conchi round to see it. Again, we're talking about spending orders here. So this does the same thing, but less aggressively, so it's not quite as good.
Yeah, and also one other issue with using the FIDE more conservatively, like this or this, is that I will move forward with many of my models.
Yeah.
So I can just move forward and then use the other short skill of the order to try to discover the FIDE. If
because
I fail,
you were going to be doing that anyway.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But if I pass, I can actually then try to take out the FIDE.
Yeah. So maybe one of the things is to avoid these opportunistic discovers, because if you're going to move, then you don't lose much by just
I probably don't want to keep my bounty hunter here, so I could just move it here to be in zone, and then take a free discover at your FIDE out of cover. And if I pass, I can keep on discovering, and then FIDE is likely
then it probably
dead.
dies. Yeah.
The other thing is that on your turn, if the FIDE survives, it's actually it will take more orders, maybe like 3 orders to get to my missile bot.
Yeah.
And on the way, there are chances that the Guangxi or something else can actually discover the FIDE.
Yes, it's true. Yeah.
So it is actually less efficient, although you don't need to roll a die to put a FIDE there.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure I'd take the 25% failure chance with one FIDE, but it's really up to you. And I think certainly if you have 2 FIDEs, I would. Absolutely, I would.
Yeah, I think that's just depends on the situation and how afraid
you are
of the Alpha Strike you are. Because if you manage to land the FIDE there, basically, it's really hard for me to get efficient GML Alpha Strike.
Yes.
Because to do that, I will need to clear the FIDE first, and if I spend orders clearing the FIDE, I don't have any more orders or enough orders to spotlight and GML your stuff.
Yeah. And remember, reactive turn, it's about wasting some time. In this mission, we want to control zones. If the FIDE was here, it's really begging for my opponent Panda to answer it. He can't answer it without spending a lot of orders. So it does have some reactive potential up here, because it's 27 points in whichever zone I choose. So, sometimes by just putting a unit in the right place, it sort of begs a question, doesn't it? It has to be answered. And in so doing, that is, saying you need to spend orders doing this.
Yeah. And there are no absolutely correct and wrong decisions here. It's just you have to assess the whole situation and try to come up with the best decision.
Yeah.
And usually the differences between decisions or the quality of the decisions, the difference of quality between decisions can be quite small.
Yeah.
But then again, those small decisions or small differences can sometimes decide the game.
Yeah, they lead to very different games.
Yeah.
So we've
and
gone
that is also one reason why Infinity is such a compelling and interesting game.
Absolutely. The difference of 1 or 2 orders in a game can make a massive difference. So we've gone on for a little bit longer than we originally planned to, but just to quickly sum up, just to make everything clear. AROs, we start by looking at the opponent's list, thinking, what's going to push into us, what's going to present a threat. Remember, just because you don't see an HMG doesn't mean there isn't an HMG. There could well be, so just be aware of that. So I've looked at the opponent's list. I've assessed the threats. I've thought, what's going to push into me? What's going to kill me at long range, etc. I've layered things, so I've made sure I have sort of 2 or 3 things in one spot. See here, I've got my my Libito, my Jammer, my Hacker, things like that. And I've also just tried to make it so that I cover these really nice, long, diagonal lines so I can take advantage of long-range weapons. What I do not want to do is see directly into my opponent's deployment zone like this, because for all I know, he's going to put a tag down there and kill me immediately in one order, so I don't want to do that. There are lots of different types of AROs. We've talked about the sort of zone of control stuff with jammers and hackers. We've talked about mines. Sorry, in there's a mine. We've talked about guns, like the Azrael, the Dr. Asawira. And then we've talked a bit about the only AROs in which you get some initiative, and that's the hidden deployed ARO, which reveals when you want it to reveal. We can do some further episodes if people want, maybe talking about things like suppressive fire and stuff like that, but I think this is a decent start. What do you think, Panda?
Yeah, just let us know if there are some other topics that you would like us to explore.
Yeah.
Like how to design an alpha strike, how to design lists, or the end game or the last turns of Infinity, how to play those, or whatever.
Absolutely.
That's you might be struggling with in your games.
But thanks so much for joining me today. I think this episode should hopefully be really informative and interesting for people. And yeah, hopefully we can do a lot more, just depending on what people want. So yeah, thank you for helping me with this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks. See you.